When you start noticing inner peace where there once was only chaos, that is one of the most powerful signs that you are growing spiritually. In the past, when something didn't go your way, or when someone offended you, you may have reacted immediately with anger, frustration, or fear. Your emotions might have controlled your decisions, leading you to say or do things you later regretted. But as you develop spiritually, something begins to shift. You no longer react instantly or harshly. Instead, you pause, you breathe, you think, and you allow yourself to respond in a way that reflects growth rather than immaturity. That doesn't mean problems disappear or that people suddenly stop testing your patience. It simply means the way you handle those moments is no longer the same. Spiritual growth changes the way you experience pressure. Where once a delay, a rejection, or an obstacle would have sent you into worry, now you begin to recognize that not everything deserves your energy. That deep sense of calm allows you to face the same challenges that once overwhelmed you, but with a steadiness that surprises even you. This inner stability is not the absence of feelings, because you will still feel hurt, anger, and disappointment, but you will also notice that those feelings no longer linger as long. They come, but they don't take root the way they used to. They pass through you, and you let them go because your spirit has become stronger than your impulses. This kind of peace is not weakness. It is actually strength under control. It takes far more power to remain calm in the middle of a storm than to lash out and lose yourself in the heat of the moment. When you are growing spiritually, you develop emotional resilience, and resilience is evidence of maturity. You recognize that you don't need to prove yourself in every argument or defend yourself against every attack. Silence becomes as powerful as words, and patience becomes as effective as action. You begin to see that not everything requires your response, because your peace is more valuable than winning a temporary battle. Another aspect of this inner peace is the way you start to detach from external circumstances. Things that used to rob you of sleep no longer hold the same weight. The opinions of others, the constant need to be right, or the desire to always be in control start to fade. You discover that you don't need to control everything in order to be at peace. You begin to trust that life unfolds the way it should, and that even when things are difficult, you have the capacity to endure them without breaking. This trust feeds your peace, and your peace, in turn, strengthens your trust. The change also becomes noticeable to those around you. Friends, family, and even coworkers may comment on how you no longer get worked up the way you used to. They may see that you approach challenges with a calm determination instead of panic. And while they might not always understand it, they will recognize that something in you has shifted. That visible difference is not just personality. It is spiritual growth shining through your character. What's interesting is that the very same situations that once broke you now shape you. The same conflicts that once drained you now teach you. The same disappointments that once left you hopeless now guide you to deeper wisdom. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it happens gradually as you continue to grow in your spirit. The storms of life don't stop, but your reaction to them becomes a testimony of your inner progress. One of the clearest signs that you are growing spiritually is when your priorities begin to shift in ways that surprise even you. In the earlier stages of life, it is natural to chase after what seems important: status, recognition, material possessions, and the approval of others. You may have measured your worth by how much money you earned, the kind of house you lived in, the clothes you wore, or how many people admired you. But as your spirit matures, you start to notice that the things which once consumed your energy no longer feel as satisfying. You begin to see through the illusion that success is only about what you have or how others see you. Instead, you start valuing things that cannot be bought or taken away, like peace of mind, purpose, and authenticity. This shift does not happen suddenly, but rather through experiences that teach you the difference between temporary happiness and lasting fulfillment. You realize that chasing material success without inner peace leaves you empty. You begin to see that approval from people can be fleeting, but alignment with your higher values is enduring. When you grow spiritually, your measure of success changes. Instead of asking, "How much can I gain?" you start asking, "How much value can I bring?" Instead of thinking, "How do I look to others?" you begin to think, "Am I true to myself and to God?" This change in questioning marks the deep work happening within you as your heart begins to crave what is eternal rather than what is temporary. Another evidence of this shift is the way you handle opportunities and choices. Before, you might have accepted anything that promised financial gain or recognition, even if it compromised your integrity. But as you grow, you begin to say no to things that don't align with your values, even if they seem lucrative. Your focus turns to living with purpose, not just living with profit. You start choosing what brings peace rather than what brings applause. This does not mean you reject ambition or growth, but it means your ambition is now rooted in meaning and service instead of ego and comparison. Relationships also reflect this change in priorities. You begin to invest more in connections that nourish your soul rather than drain it. You care less about being surrounded by crowds and more about being surrounded by people who truly uplift you. You stop trying to force yourself into spaces where you don't belong and instead seek relationships that align with love, respect, and mutual growth. You understand that spiritual alignment is worth far more than social popularity. This allows you to walk away from toxic environments without guilt and step into healthier spaces without hesitation. Your time and energy also become sacred. You realize that every day is a gift, and you stop wasting hours on distractions that don't contribute to your growth. Social validation, endless comparison, and meaningless arguments no longer interest you. You begin to ask yourself, will this matter a year from now? Will this feed my soul? If the answer is no, you move on without regret. This shows that you are no longer controlled by impulses, but guided by wisdom. The shift in priorities also changes the way you view setbacks and failures. What once looked like a loss now looks like a lesson. You stop prioritizing comfort and start prioritizing growth, even when growth comes with discomfort. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin to ask, "What can I learn from this?" That mindset shows that your spirit is no longer chasing ease, but chasing depth. At a deeper level, spiritual growth aligns you with service. You recognize that your life has more meaning when it contributes to the lives of others. You begin to see your resources, talents, and opportunities not only as tools for your success, but as blessings to be shared. The need to impress people fades, and the desire to impact people grows stronger. You feel more fulfilled giving than constantly taking, more satisfied serving than constantly seeking recognition. This shift proves that your spirit is awakening to a higher purpose, one that goes beyond yourself and into something greater. Compassion and forgiveness are among the deepest indicators that you are truly growing spiritually because they require you to rise above your natural instincts and choose something higher. When you are not yet mature in your spirit, it is easy to hold on to bitterness, to react harshly when someone hurts you, or to carry grudges as if they protect you. But as you grow, you begin to notice that your heart responds differently. Where you once felt the need for revenge, you start feeling a pull toward understanding. Where you once carried anger for weeks or months, you start releasing it sooner. That release is not a sign of weakness but of strength, because forgiveness requires far more power than resentment ever will. Compassion means learning to see beyond someone's actions to the pain or ignorance that might be driving them. It does not excuse wrong behavior, but it helps you separate the person from the act. When you grow spiritually, you develop the ability to look at others with empathy, to ask yourself what they might be going through, and to treat them with kindness even when they don't deserve it. This is not about being naive or letting people mistreat you, but about understanding that holding hatred in your heart only poisons you. Compassion sets you free because it allows you to love without conditions and to show grace where you once might have shown judgment. Forgiveness is another profound mark of spiritual maturity. At first, forgiveness can feel impossible, especially when the wound runs deep. But as your spirit matures, you realize that forgiveness is less about the other person and more about your own peace. It is about no longer allowing the offense to control you or dictate how you feel. When you forgive, you release yourself from the prison of resentment and choose to move forward without carrying the heavy baggage of the past. Spiritual growth teaches you that forgiveness does not mean reconciliation in every case, nor does it mean forgetting, but it does mean choosing freedom over bondage, healing over bitterness, and peace over pain. This growth is seen in small, everyday choices as well as in the big, life-changing ones. It may show up in the patience you extend to someone who is rude in traffic, or in the grace you offer a coworker who misunderstands you. It may also show up in how you handle family members who disappointed you or friends who betrayed you. As you grow spiritually, your ability to forgive expands beyond what you thought possible, and you begin to experience the joy that comes from letting go. That joy is the fruit of a spirit that has been strengthened by love rather than weakened by anger. Compassion and forgiveness also deepen your relationships. When you treat people with understanding instead of judgment, they feel safer to be their true selves around you. When you forgive quickly instead of holding grudges, your connections become lighter and healthier. People are drawn to the peace that radiates from you, and you begin to attract relationships rooted in love and authenticity. Your growth inspires others, showing them that it is possible to live without bitterness, even in a world full of conflict. At a higher level, compassion and forgiveness expand the way you see humanity. You begin to understand that everyone is on their own journey, that people make mistakes out of fear, ignorance, or pain, and that extending grace is often the greatest gift you can offer. This perspective allows you to live with more patience and less judgment, more understanding and less criticism. You realize that compassion does not make you vulnerable. It makes you strong because it requires you to rise above your ego and walk in love. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but it transforms the way the past lives inside you, replacing bitterness with wisdom and pain with peace. Trust in God, and the process is one of the most profound demonstrations of spiritual growth because it reveals a shift in how you approach life's uncertainties. When you are spiritually immature, there is often an overwhelming need to control every outcome, to know exactly how things will unfold, and to force situations into alignment with your expectations. This creates fear, anxiety, and frustration when things don't go according to your plan. But as your spirit matures, you begin to release that tight grip, learning instead to surrender to divine timing and to believe that there is a greater plan at work beyond what you can see. This surrender is not about passivity or giving up, but about trusting that God's wisdom and perspective are infinitely greater than your own. When you grow spiritually, your faith deepens in moments of uncertainty. Instead of panicking when doors close or when prayers seem unanswered, you begin to rest in the belief that delays are not denials and that what is meant for you will come in its time. This trust allows you to see setbacks as redirections rather than rejections. You stop interpreting disappointments as failures and start viewing them as opportunities for growth or preparation. The more you lean into faith, the less you feel the need to manipulate or control, because you recognize that God's hand is guiding you even when it doesn't look like it. This kind of trust also changes the way you handle challenges. Before, you may have asked, "Why me?" when facing difficulties, but as your spiritual maturity grows, the question shifts to, "What is this teaching me?" Or, "How is this shaping me?" You recognize that the process itself is part of the blessing, that endurance builds character, and that patience develops strength. Trusting in God's process means you accept that the path may not be straight, but it is purposeful. It means you are willing to walk through uncertainty with faith rather than fear, knowing that each step, even the painful ones, carries meaning. Another sign of this trust is your ability to release control over timing. Spiritual growth teaches you that rushing ahead often leads to mistakes, and that waiting with faith opens the door to greater outcomes than you could have arranged yourself. Trusting God requires patience, and patience is one of the hardest, yet most rewarding disciplines of the Spirit. It means being content in the waiting season, believing that what you need is being prepared for you as much as you are being prepared for it. You stop trying to force doors open and instead learn to walk through the ones that open naturally, knowing that the right opportunities come when you are ready, not when you are restless. Trust in God, and the process also brings peace to your mind. Where anxiety once ruled, faith begins to quiet your thoughts. Where fear once dictated your actions, trust begins to guide your decisions. You realize that you don't need to have all the answers because you are not walking alone. This peace allows you to make choices with clarity instead of panic, and to move forward with confidence, even when you cannot see the full path ahead. Your trust becomes your anchor, keeping you steady when life feels unstable. This level of faith influences the way you pray and the way you live. Your prayers shift from demanding specific outcomes to asking for wisdom, guidance, and strength to follow the path laid before you. You stop asking only for comfort and start asking for growth. You become more open to God's will, even when it doesn't align with your original desires, because you trust that His plan is ultimately better than anything you could design. This humility and surrender are marks of deep spiritual maturity. Over time, trusting God and the process reshapes your outlook on life. You become less reactive to sudden changes because you know nothing happens without purpose. You stop comparing your journey to others because you trust that your timeline is uniquely yours. You begin to live with a quiet confidence that no matter what comes, you are being guided, protected, and prepared for greater things. This trust does not remove challenges, but it transforms the way you walk through them, giving you strength, patience, and peace that cannot be shaken. Gratitude as a lifestyle is one of the clearest signs of spiritual growth because it reveals that your perspective has shifted from focusing on what is missing to appreciating what is already present. In the early stages of life, it is common to dwell on the things you don't have, the goals you haven't reached, or the opportunities that slipped away. That mindset creates dissatisfaction, envy, and a constant feeling of lack. But as your spirit matures, you begin to notice blessings that once went unseen. You become aware of the simple gifts you used to take for granted. The breath in your lungs, the people who support you, the lessons hidden in struggles, the moments of joy tucked inside ordinary days. Gratitude transforms the way you view your circumstances, allowing you to find contentment not in perfection, but in appreciation. When gratitude becomes a way of life, it changes the way you wake up in the morning and the way you go to sleep at night. You no longer start your day complaining about what you lack, but by recognizing what you have. You begin to see challenges as opportunities to grow and setbacks as lessons that guide you towards strength and wisdom. This mindset doesn't mean you ignore pain or pretend struggles don't exist, but it means you choose to find light even in dark places. Gratitude teaches you that joy is not found in the absence of problems, but in the presence of perspective. Spiritual growth also makes you realize that gratitude is not just about big victories, but about the small, everyday blessings. A smile from a loved one, a meal on your table, the ability to learn, the chance to try again after failure. These become sources of joy that fill your heart. Instead of waiting for life to be perfect to be thankful, you learn to be thankful in every stage of life. Gratitude as a lifestyle allows you to celebrate progress even when the journey feels unfinished. You begin to measure your life, not only by what you have accomplished, but by how much you can appreciate along the way. Gratitude also shifts the way you view other people. Instead of comparing yourself to them and feeling inadequate, you begin to admire their gifts without resentment. You become genuinely happy for the success of others because you are no longer living in a scarcity mindset. You understand that someone else's blessing does not diminish your own. Gratitude opens your heart to celebrate with others while still appreciating your unique journey. It frees you from jealousy and replaces it with joy, making your relationships more authentic and uplifting. Another dimension of gratitude as a lifestyle is the way it strengthens your resilience. When you face adversity, gratitude gives you the power to focus on what remains instead of what was lost. It becomes a source of hope that keeps you moving forward when life feels heavy. Gratitude doesn't erase pain, but it provides the perspective that pain is not the whole story. Even in loss, there are lessons. Even in hardship, there is growth. Even in difficulty, there is still something to be thankful for. This perspective is what allows spiritually mature people to endure storms without being consumed by them, because they find reasons to give thanks in the middle of struggle. Living with gratitude also deepens your connection with God. Every moment of thankfulness becomes a form of worship, an acknowledgement that what you have is not by accident, but by grace. You begin to see blessings not as entitlements, but as gifts. This awareness makes your prayers less about asking and more about appreciating. Gratitude turns your relationship with God into one of trust and reverence, where you no longer just focus on requests, but on recognition of His presence in every detail of your life. Gratitude as a lifestyle ultimately creates an atmosphere of abundance in your heart. When you focus on what you already have, you realize that life is richer than you once thought. You no longer wait for extraordinary events to feel joy, because you have trained your spirit to find beauty in the ordinary. This kind of gratitude builds a foundation of peace, contentment, and hope that cannot be shaken by external circumstances, because it is rooted in perspective rather than possessions. Humility and the desire to keep growing are among the strongest indicators of true spiritual maturity, because they show that you recognize growth is not about arriving at a final destination, but about continually becoming. When you are not spiritually mature, it is easy to fall into the trap of pride, believing that you already know enough, that you have already achieved enough, or that you no longer need guidance. But as you grow in your spirit, you begin to understand that the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. This awareness creates humility, not in the sense of weakness or self-doubt, but in the sense of remaining open, teachable, and willing to receive wisdom from both successes and failures. Humility allows you to walk through life without arrogance. You stop needing to prove yourself to others or to constantly be the center of attention. Instead, you become comfortable with listening more than speaking, with learning rather than always needing to teach. You understand that wisdom can come from unexpected places, and that even the smallest experiences can carry powerful lessons. Spiritual growth shows itself in your ability to remain grounded no matter how far you rise, because you know that everything you have achieved is not only by your own strength, but also through grace, guidance, and opportunities that were given to you. This humility naturally fuels a desire to keep growing. When you are truly spiritually mature, you do not see growth as optional, you see it as essential. You are not satisfied with staying the same, because you recognize that life is a continuous process of becoming better, kinder, wiser, and more aligned with your higher purpose. The desire to keep growing pushes you to seek knowledge, to spend time in reflection, to ask deeper questions, and to remain curious about the mysteries of life and the wisdom of God. Instead of being stagnant, your spirit stays in motion, always reaching for more depth and more truth. Another aspect of humility is the way it shapes your relationships with others. When you are humble, you no longer feel the need to look down on anyone or to elevate yourself above them. You treat people with respect, regardless of their background, status, or achievements. You can admit when you are wrong and apologize sincerely because you are no longer controlled by pride. You can celebrate the success of others without jealousy because you are secure in your own journey. Humility allows you to be approachable, and it makes people trust you because they sense authenticity rather than arrogance. This authenticity is one of the clearest signs that your spirit is maturing. The desire to keep growing also keeps you from becoming complacent. Even when you achieve certain goals or reach certain milestones, you don't stop seeking more understanding and more depth. You read, you reflect, you pray, you learn from experience, and you surround yourself with people who challenge you to rise higher. You recognize that spiritual growth is not a one-time event, but a lifelong journey. There is always more to discover, always more to learn, and always more ways to become better. This attitude of continuous growth prevents stagnation and keeps your spirit vibrant and alive. Humility also affects the way you handle challenges and failures. Instead of letting them crush your identity, you view them as opportunities for learning. You can admit when you have made mistakes and use those mistakes as stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks. This ability to learn without shame and grow without ego demonstrates a maturity that many never reach. Humility keeps you grounded enough to accept correction and wise enough to apply the lessons. Ultimately, humility and the desire to keep growing create a cycle that sustains your spiritual journey. The more humble you are, the more open you are to learning. The more you learn, the more you realize how much more growth is possible. This cycle ensures that your spirit never becomes stagnant and that your character keeps expanding in wisdom, love, and authenticity.